How might the international relocation of species affect the future environment of selection? For example, sweet corn in Europe, European diaspora, no wolves in Britain, a zoo animal escapes internationally. I can give you a very good answer to that question. A group at the University of Arizona are working on a theory called the portmanteau traveling biota theory. The portmanteau traveling biota theory is based on the idea that humans and their domesticates exerted a reciprocal influence on one another's evolution. And that when different populations of humans spread to different parts of the world, it's not just this bunch of people moving over to this other part of the world. They bring with them their portmanteau biota. That means their diseases, that means their domesticates, their cultivars, their crops, their pests and vermin. All of that travels with them. And it's interesting because there are strong co-evolutionary pressures, which have arisen in the course of human evolution from domesticates. A good example would be lactate persistence and its spread. It's obvious that if you can metabolize lactose, you can break that down and use it as a dietary sugar. You can liberate huge numbers of calories for very little effort. All you need to do is have dairy. So, it's not a surprise that lactase persistence spread concomitantly with dairying culture, with the spread of cows. So, where you get one, you get the other. This is one of the earliest examples of an unambiguous culture gene coevolution. But don't forget we also did things to cows which affected their evolution. So, domestication was very much a two-way street. The same is true of crops. All this nonsense people have about they can't digest this, that, and the other substance, like gluten. Well, it turns out that yes, some people can digest it, other people have a harder time digesting it. Gluten sufficiency might actually relate to a history of how we co-evolve with respect to certain domesticates, some of which may have produced foodstuffs that were very rich in gluten, like wheat. So it's clear that there is this tremendous co-evolutionary pressure, that humans have all, not just in isolation, they evolve in relation to their surrounding ecology, and they've exerted reciprocal effects on the composition of that ecology. And the way they influence the selective pressures acting on specific species through artificial selection in turn influence the sets of relationships that existed between those species and other species, which meant you could have these massive impacts on the surrounding ecology as a consequence of the action of human domestication pressures. So, it's a hugely important question, and it's one for which data is being gathered in terms of being able to comprehensively test this portmanteau biota model. And actually, there's a very good paper published in the journal Evolutionary Psychological Sciences. It's called Plants, Parasites, and People. And they look at this very mysterious association, which seems to exist between the presence of coniferous plants and perennial plants, which are present in more northerly latitudes, and parasite burden and chitin selection in humans. And what they found is that the presence of evergreen plants versus perennial plants which drop their leaves onto the ground once a year, like oak woody dicots. The presence of these strongly mediates the association between the prevalence of parasites in the environment and your level of life history speed, so how slow your life history is. And it turns out that the reason the plants mediate this association is because what's happening is the plants are engaging in chemical warfare against parasites in the soil, pushing the numbers of those parasites down, which in turn releases humans from a major source of our selection, i.e. disease outbreaks that cause unpredictable mortality and morbidity, which is the major factor selecting fast life history. So, where you have all these plants, you have a strong co-evolutionary pressure. The plants are doing something for humans, which means the humans are more likely to do things that are going to encourage the growth of these plants. So that's a good example of this reciprocal effect, which is mediated through the effect of a plant on parasites and the downstream effect that that's had on human adaptive landscape in these regions.